Good morning. Welcome to the second episode for Outside In. Just to give you a brief recap of this Outside In podcast, we are hoping to get a lot of people onto this podcast to give all of us a perspective on what is happening outside Thoughtworks. There are multiple conversations that happen that are extremely interesting that all of these guys have. So this is just to make sure that there's one more medium for that to reach out to you. So we have Sagar and Samir
Hi guys, this is Samir.
and Sumit.
Hello there. And we have Gunjan,
Yeah.
who's our fantastic host for this episode.
Second
Thank
As
you.
am I.
Second time in a row.
Yeah. So for this particular one, we actually thought that we will share stories that Sagar and Samir have, for us for the last 2 months. And interesting people that have met. They actually met a lot of interesting people. But we're going to share, I think, 3 stories today. Is that right? So we're going to start with Sagar. Sagar, we had this whole focus on data for the last 1 year or so.
That's right.
And I believe that we had a face-to-face for data where we got somebody external to give us a perspective on what we're doing and what they have been doing in the market as well. Do you want to talk more about that?
Sure. Thanks, Gunjan, and good morning to everybody. I think just a minor correction, data is not for just this year. I think data would be a key strategic asset and a strategic imperative for ThoughtWorks for some time. And when I say that, I bring the story of having Shine Dev Banerjee, that's his full name, over to our offices to do a face-to-face, a discussion of sorts, where the hope was that we would, kind of reflect on, along with him, some of the work that we have done thus far in terms of our value propositions, the competency map, and how we take things to the market. He would kind of, share his perspectives on where we are. But more importantly, he would share his views on where the data market is up to. So he has over 20 years of experience in the data market. And you would think that being in that market for that long, he would be fairly regimented in his thinking and such. And we have been in our business thinking about advanced analytics for the last 4 or 5 odd years.
Let me interrupt you there.
Sure.
So when you say we have been thinking, just for the benefit of people listening, who are these we?
ThoughtWorks. ThoughtWorks as in individuals as a practice, or even before the practice began, the work that we started doing with Caterpillar with one of the first instances of Hadoop began about 4.5 years ago. So we've been in this business for a while. So we would expect that we know a whole lot about data. But I think the eye-opening thing about the whole conversation during the day was that he kind of looked at us and our value propositions, and he was able to bring in very interesting perspectives on how the data world is kind of migrating, how people are using data as a strategic asset, as a significant competitive advantage, and moving forward.
Can you give us an example of that as to what did he say?
Sure. One of the past companies that we shared together as an alum, actually does $180 million worth of business. And this is a number that I quote as I know from
That
2
is
years
Mu
ago.
Sigma, right?
That is Mu Sigma. And it has 4,000 people, and they just do data analytics. Well, a bunch of, quite a bit of it is not advanced analytics, but they add significant value to customers using data. I know for sure that companies such as Palantir, who made a huge mark in the U.S. market, and they're tens of $billions in market capitalization, just use a couple of, not even tens of algorithms or hundreds of algorithms, a couple of algorithms to build out areas such as fraud, and where Homeland Security, for instance, uses them significantly for their uses. And there are several other uses for that particular algorithm, but a couple of algorithms make a huge impact to to several use cases. Mm-hmm. So those are some examples, where data is used as comparative advantage of sorts. But the interesting thing about the conversation, though, was that we got to hear several different ways where we could use data, not just data, but our own fabric of our competitive advantage, such as building platforms and engineering, and that becomes very, very potent. So those were some of the conversations that we've had.
So
Very
you mean
interesting.
something like building platforms for data analytics?
Yes, those could be one of those areas, but the whole point being, we in our own world, we would have thought about one or two areas, and we would have gone out to the market with the customers, and in those conversations it seemed that there could be a whole new different set of possibilities, not one or two. So which basically gives us the opportunity to sort of innovate some before we hit the customer, and some we hit on the fly as we have met the customer, saying you could do this and that and something else as well.
So I'm asking a rhetorical question, obviously, because we've discussed this in other circles. But why wouldn't ThoughtWorks build out a product for the purpose? I mean, for example, just a few days back, Facebook put out Profit for forecasting. Why wouldn't ThoughtWorks build a product and put it out to customers in the data space?
I have some thoughts, but I would expect Samir to chip in as well with the history that he has. In my opinion, building out a product and putting it out in the market is 10% engineering and 90% marketing plus sales plus every other thing that ThoughtWorks doesn't do right now. And in my opinion, our understanding of that 90% has to be amped up to such an extent that it could potentially stretch and break our fabric of what we do and what we can bring to the customers in our current scheme of things. However, things may change. And Samir, would you want to comment on that?
Yeah, no. I mean, my opinion is +1 to Sagar, but I would say if you look at ThoughtWorks history, we have built products and we have always taken a view of building software assets which kind of act as an augmentation to our primary service. So if we were so convinced that and we had an opinion on how to build software in a right way or in a good way, then we build products, software products. I'm talking about all the studios products, which will actually help even others build the software assets in a right way.
Yeah.
I do think there are opportunities to think about data also in a similar way. So if we believe that there is something that can be wonderful done with the data, I would not go all the way to saying that we should build products, but I think it's very fair to really say we should have an opinion, couple it or augment it with some of the frameworks, some of the ready-made components that we actually can offer to the customer and open source them.
Yeah, I mean, so why not build an open source platform like you were saying, right? I mean, coming back to the platform for analytics sort of a thing, why not build that open source platform? And I would really appreciate if you can give me an example, because I'm not really technical, to say that how is that platform for analytics actually going to affect people like me?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, if you look at the data space per se, it is extremely wide. There are companies in the pharmaceutical domain, for instance, who've built not just products, but they have built their offerings on the kind of data that people would like to buy in the prescription space, right? So they will own the platform, but more importantly, they will own the data which resides on the platform as well. So having said that, it can go to that extent. There are at least 4 large companies in the US. There are multi-billion-dollar companies who make money that way. So it's to that extent where a company could own data as well as the platform, but it could become a company which is completely a tech company, which is just in the business of scraping data and cleaning data. Or you could just be doing data governance, or you could help in building data or pushing data up onto the cloud for further massaging and usage. So I think there are several ways in which we can look at the problem space and figure out where we could make an investment, and that could help us go to market faster, one. Second is about giving us a quick start. to the propositions that we have or our customer engagements that help the customer, one, see that ThoughtWorks is a great player on data, but more importantly, in their initiatives and in their implementations, they see this as a great product that they can use to kickstart their implementations. One such area that we were thinking of and started an Apache project was around data governance and data cleansing and things such as that. So there is more to be seen around that. That's not the only place. But yes, I mean, there are many opportunities around that.
So just for a minute, if we just, get out of ThoughtWorks context, from your conversation, Sagar, for Chayan,
Yes.
what is the game-changing move that's going to happen in the next 3 to 5 years in this space that's going to change the way people are going to look at this space altogether?
Let me just be a little controversial over there that computing will change forever in the next few years.
Mm-hmm.
And when I say that, the way we look at putting, having a deterministic view of a particular use case, for instance, which is based on a certain input, and it is very deterministic. Based on that input, you will always get some output. But algorithms are coming in which are actually modifying and self-learning in some ways. When you are writing your programs using such self-learning computational methods, how would you even test whether the algorithm is producing the right result or not? So when you are putting in computational techniques which use machine learning and AI, and it is exponentially increasing, not in big ways but in small ways. So for instance, even in personalization that you do on the website, an AI component is sitting over there which is self-learning, right? How would you even know that an 80-year-old lady who is just about browsing her shopping cart, for instance, on the iPad is being recommended the right products? It will be extremely hard for you to test it. Those are areas in which, in my opinion, we'll have to, in fact, not just change the way the world is changing, but also help, as ThoughtWorks, change the way the world actually thinks. And we are supposed to be one of the leaders in helping other people, bring great products in the market from a tech standpoint. So shouldn't we have a point of view? And I'm giving just one example where it could be a tectonic shift from computation standpoint.
Yeah, I think, yeah, it's good.
So just rounding this whole thing up. So we started with Chayan. How are we engaging with him going forward?
Also, he continues to be a friend of ThoughtWorks, and in fact, in many ways, we are reaching out to him to get his sort of mind share on how we could build our data competency. He runs, after our last prior jobs, he runs a very successful startup. He's been at it for the last 6 months, and he's already not having had to take any private equity or VC funding, and he has built a team of 15-20 people already.
Incredible.
So we continue to remain engaged in many ways, just from a friend of ThoughtWorks perspective at this point in time.
And in that, just to, since we are rounding this conversation off, in that meeting, along with Sagar, it was Srihari, PK, and Venkat who were also in the meeting. So if any one of people who are listening to this podcast, if they are interested in knowing more and wanting to engage in the conversations that we continue to have with Sayan, these 3 or 4 would be the right people to use as conduit for those conversations.
Venkat's going to Australia. Maybe he will be here with some perspectives from Australia outside in.
Yeah,
we should. So next episode.
Okay.
Yeah, next episode. Thanks, Sagar. It was interesting for us to know that not only that we have to change, we have to understand the space, but we have to be the pioneers in figuring out how do we change that. And one of the things that we were talking about change, and me and Sami were talking yesterday around how to change the way we engage communities. He had a very interesting conversation at Freedom of Software Movement conference, was it?
So I attended Free Software Movements of India annual conference. They call it annual, but this was second time in 4 years.
You spoke at the conference.
I spoke as well. So yes, I spoke as well. Roy spoke there. I spoke there. Prabir spoke there. So there were like three key people from TWI speaking there. So this conference was in Chennai, and there I met Sharad Sharma, the guy who founded iSpirit and is one of the primary force behind India Stack. He was speaking on India Stack there. Some of us, me, Sapto remembered him when I mentioned of his name. Some of us had met him in 2011 or 2012 when he had come to ThoughtWorks and met ILT or India Leadership Team at that time and spent a couple hours with us. Very interesting chap. So yes, I was in Chennai and I had a conversation with him, and then this was about a couple months back. This was late December, and in the last couple months I've spoken to him 2-3 times, and a very interesting person in general.
You did talk about ecosystems and how to engage within ecosystem, right?
Correct. So I was so in one of those conversations, one of the many conversations with Sharad, I was asking him about how do we create very vibrant ecosystems. I was talking predominantly about Pune because I'm from Pune, and there is another linkage of Software Exporters Association of Pune, SEEP, on which I'm currently acting as a president. It's an industry association. I think we talked about it in the last podcast as well. So combination of ThoughtWorks interest and SEEP interest, I was asking Sharad what are his thoughts on building great technology ecosystems. And Sharad had some very interesting viewpoints. So he was telling me that why he believes Silicon Valley has been able to create so much of enthusiasm and build a great ecosystem, and where we, and when we say we, in general, technologists in India and ThoughtWorks in particular, what can we do to really build a similar ecosystem? But before we get there, I mean, he had a sort of a theory. So let me explain that theory element. So he was telling me that typically from the ecosystem perspective or engaging the community perspective, people do 3 types of things. First one is, he called it as lean back events. So these are the events which are typically large format event, similar to the Free Software Movements of India conference that I was talking about, where I was on a podium and there were 100, 200, in that conference there were 1,000 people, but some X number of people sitting in front of a speaker, and speaker is talking. Of course, most speakers want to engage people in question answer, but that's very minimal engagement. He calls that as a lean back way of learning, because most of the people are leaning back in the chair and listening to some gyan being given by a person on a podium. Then he says there are lean forward ways of learning. So this is very similar to how we run our projects, and arguably how we want to run our community activities. So this is about everybody, whoever is in this conversation, participating almost in an equal manner. Everybody has something to share and something to learn from that conversation. And his viewpoint was the more you have lean forward movements or lean forward events, it's better for the ecosystem. And he knows ThoughtWorks since as I was saying, last 4-5 years. It has been a light touch engagement, but he knows ThoughtWorks. And he was saying, Samir, you should almost carry a responsibility to have more and more lean forward movements, because you think in that way. And he was saying, you as in ThoughtWorks thinks in that way. Thought workers would be naturally good in doing those. We most of our ways of engaging with the customer are stickies and workshops, and everybody speaks and you collect the ideas. Not that somebody stands up and say, hey, I know how to do software and I will tell you what the requirements are, and someone else writing down, right? And he was saying exactly the same thing. You do the same thing for the movements. And he was saying, and then I'll stop. He was saying that if you do enough of lean forward movements, where typically lean forward movements are 20, 30, 40 people at the max collaborating in a single event. And those events should actually generate cohorts. And cohorts are the mechanism for 4 or 5 people to take an idea from the lean forward event or movement, and then take that idea further and build something useful, productive out of it. It can then give a rise to startup. It can give rise to just an idea that 5 people work together and build it into something meaningful.
And iSpirit that way actually kind of operates as a system of cohorts as well as people who are embedded into that volunteer organization as well, right?
Correct.
Just for the benefit of people, can you just quickly tell how iSpirit works?
Sure. So iSpirit, when they founded, it was specifically founded to support product development in India and support community building of software product development.
With India Stack at the center.
That happened recently.
Yeah.
So iSpirit is older than India Stack in a way. So it actually started as a alternative narrative to NASSCOM, thinking that NASSCOM's focus was software companies who are and then bring them together to collaborate for enhancing the export orientation and enhancing the export revenues of India. Whereas iSpirit's focus was let the product building companies collaborate with each other and learn from each other. And you're right. I mean, they work in the similar manner. So he was telling me that iSpirit actually has 2-3 elements. One is they control the number of lean back events. So they do not do more than X number. They started with 3 or 4. Currently, their focus is doing only maximum 2 events in a year, which are lean back events, where somebody comes and displays their product and everybody else is listening, right? They have gone to the level of saying that cohorts usually should be doing most of the work voluntarily, and hence they focus very heavily on volunteering, and that's what has led to a lot of India Stack type of movement. So when India Stack as an idea originally started, some people came together and they said, hey, we will voluntarily spend time on it, and if idea resonates with someone else, can you also join me in doing that work? And so Nandan and Pramod Verma and all of these guys, they literally ended up recruiting one person at a time because the idea resonates, and you don't need anything else. There is no commercial agreement, there is no vision that it will become a product and a startup and stuff like that. It's a great idea. I want to collaborate and I want to contribute. And that's how, and yes, you are right. It started as a small cohort. It has become now big, but bunch of small cohorts. And that's what iSpirit believes is the right way of building ecosystem.
But Sameer, isn't it true that for cohorts to form, the ideas don't need to be, like you were saying, having a vision, having a finality to it, right? I mean, I think people will join in voluntarily or participating in the idea if I can feel, if Sagar has said something, I can feel that I can contribute to it, and that's sort of co-creating rather than me following Sagar's idea on.
Oh, absolutely. And that's why he linked it to lean forward movements. He was saying in the lean forward event, the way he was describing was idea to form a cohort, idea necessarily has to be not fully fleshed out. Because it's a fully fleshed out idea in one person's mind, for somebody else to participate and feel ownership of that idea is much more difficult. You can get wowed with it, but you don't feel I'm contributing and enhancing the idea. So, and in a lean forward way where you are actually, it's large group, you are sharing, collaborating, challenging each other's viewpoints, and then something strikes that, me and Sumit, say for example, in this conversation, we are saying the same thing. Hey, I will automatically connect with Sumit to take that particular thread forward. That's the beginning of a cohort. And necessarily the starting points are usually on unfinished ideas or half-baked ideas.
So what you're saying, Sameer, is very interesting to me because, it's also counterintuitive in many ways. Because then sometimes doesn't expertise get in the way?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I think expertise does get in the way, and he actually made a good observation about ThoughtWorks, and he believes that ThoughtWorks, when we do events, our ability to do lean forward movement or lean forward events every weekend, say for example, is very, very high because we think in that way. But expertise is something that comes in a way, or that's what we believe it comes in a way. Because if you believe that other people who are participating and you know a little bit more than them, you will automatically, doesn't matter what is the format of the group and how you are sitting, you will automatically act as if it's a lean back event and you will start preaching. And I'll give you an example of vodka. I've talked to so many people. I think it's one of the best events in ThoughtWorks. So this is by no way a criticism of Vodka itself or of the community. But I've heard from many people that in Vodka, a lot of thought workers learn a lot from each other, but hardly learn anything from the outsiders. And I think the reason partially is because we are so good and our thought process is slightly evolved as compared to others' thought process when it comes to testing and automation and how we integrate it with the software development lifecycle, that other people find all of those ideas to be fully baked, and hence their role is absorbing rather than contributing. And you are right. So expertise in a way can come, and if you are conscious about it, I think you can remain focused on real collaboration.
So the corollary also could be then true that a participant may feel subordinated in some ways and may therefore not participate enough, and hence those ideas may not come up. So I think the whole point being great ideas can come from anywhere and anybody. I mean, we all know that great startups have been formed not by the smartest people who were there in colleges or in schools. I mean, people who were able to hustle, who were smart on the street, got their ideas up in the market and got them going, which means it just doesn't really need raw smarts. It's something else.
Absolutely. And frankly, we don't know enough. I mean, this is the conversation. I thought it was great conversation. I thought it is worth us thinking and doing small experiments here and there, changing, doing tweaks to how we operate in a way. And see if it makes sense. I mean, that was his observation, but you are right. I mean, I agree with you, Sagar.
I actually see quite a lot of resonance with something that Rashi keeps talking about, the doer gene. We tend towards these sage on the stage kind of events, which you described in those words as lean back events.
Correct.
Whereas with the doer gene that we have, we might be better suited to co-creation kind of events, which then generates cohorts. And maybe that's the way we build communities inside, communities outside.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And not just not inside and outside, I think with our customers also, right? And that just reminds me of a conversation that we were having, Sagar. And when you actually went to Kroger
yes.
and met the head of digital, Matt Thompson, and he was talking about something, saying that how can ThoughtWorks and Kroger get engaged together to be able to do something even more than what we're trying to do, right? And that was sort of what Sameer has been talking about as well. It's not a full-fledged idea as such.
Oh, absolutely. And I think in all the conversations that I have with customers, I seem to go in with an idea in mind that I need to plant in the customer's head that at some point in time...
I'm sure the customer is also thinking the same way.
And I used to think that the customer is thinking that, hey, I've got somebody who I need to tell because, ThoughtWorks works with me and they pay us to get things done. So it is their right to say that you're not doing things right or you may be... But, this particular conversation was in many ways, it was a learning experience for me. Out of the many trips that I've had at Kroger and more, broadly to many of our customers over a long period of time, this conversation essentially helped me see beyond the production box.
Mm-hmm.
So Matt and his organization runs the digital business, which not necessarily is just the code that sits in the production box that runs the e-commerce, but the back end, the fulfillment of putting groceries in the bag, picking, packing, shipping, making sure that in front of every Kroger store, and just for people who do not know Kroger enough, it is one of the largest grocers in the world. They do $105 billion worth of business, and they are extremely ambitious. They want to be $210 billion in the over the next 3 to 4 years, and their stock prices are doing extremely well. And the e-commerce piece itself does about $1 billion worth of revenue. I mean, as ThoughtWorks, we haven't yet touched $500 million worth of revenue.
Yeah.
So their e-commerce, their shopping basket does that much. So the amount of effort that needs to happen, that needs to go in to make a shopping cart full, physically full, post somebody clicking buy, is so significant, and how technology can potentially help And that brings us to the conversation about, hey, so it is almost incumbent on us to think as to what can we do as ThoughtWorks or any technologist can do to help things beyond the production box. Was very, very eye-opening for me.
So how does technology then disrupt a physical store? I know that Kroger actually is not one of the grocers which have a lot of digital presence today, like from a website, mobile perspective, and I think it's just happened in the last 4-5 years. But how do you then help as technology or as technologists to disrupt a business which is I don't know, maybe 50 to 100 years old, to actually disrupt itself and double it? I mean,
Absolutely. So, one of the conversations that we had, and I don't recall whether it was that conversation or the one prior, is to talk about who Kroger's competition was. And, sometimes we feel it is incumbent on us to give them the ideas, but, it almost kind of stumped us when they spoke about several different formats which are becoming competition for them, which was completely unheard of. So, for instance, whole foods and organics become, competition all of a sudden. They are not stable, but they get you a large portion of your profitability. Just so you know, 2% to 3% is the margin that they make on groceries sold. But if you were to buy organic stuff, the margins over there could be upwards of 25%. If you were to buy pharmaceutical products, it could give you up to 15%. If you buy, prescription medicines, that number could go beyond between 30 and 100%. So people are thinking of, changing their assortment, which brings the customer in and then help them, sell such, a different assortment in many ways. Not just that, which is the physical store front is also going and undergoing huge disruptions because boutiques are coming in. Restaurants are forming within the grocers. And the restaurants at this point in time, for instance, are not being served by the grocer. It is being served by other companies. And incidentally, Kroger is served by another of our customers called Cisco, SYS. That's the name of the company, Cisco Foods, and they do supplies. So Cisco Foods runs the restaurants within Kroger. So the deli, the meat, the cheeses section, and all of the veggies that you can buy are done by Cisco. And obviously they're paying a lot of money. Kroger doesn't manage it. Kroger just provides real estate. But I'm sure Kroger is thinking that it should be theirs because that's a huge margin business. So that's one form of competition, which is in the physical storefront. Things are changing, and they need to up their tech game to make sure that they are able to compete on a real-time basis with newer formats coming in. The other is Amazon Go. Yeah. Think about the different things that a person sitting in front of his or her computer or a phone able to do right now that Kroger is unable to tap. And that very important, your computing time or of a consumer's computing time is actually going into competing spaces. So people are not going to malls as much as they would have done so in the past. People are not going to or cannot go to grocers as much. They would much rather sit back and watch Netflix, but still have home-cooked food. And how does Kroger, therefore, look at the whole supply chain of food and home-cooked food into the consumer space? So where Amazon Go is one of those, but Uber Eats, for instance, is another competition for Kroger.
Uber Eats?
Yes. So, say Uber now delivers, restaurant food to people, right, in their homes. So this was probably unheard of, or they wouldn't have unthought of, 2 years ago. But all of a sudden, Uber Eats is going to compete with Kroger.
That's interesting.
So those are some of the models that Kroger has to fight. Now, you are a grocer. You run a brick and mortar store, which is hundreds of thousands of square feet wide, where a significant part of your investment is real estate. And you are having to think on the feet on making computing technology investments which are changing by the month. So that's, I think, a huge mind shift change that we need to, in my opinion, we feel incumbent to help our customers. And those are the conversations that we've had.
Just coming down to brass tacks, though, what does that mean for me as a consultant?
Oh, absolutely. I think for each of any piece of work that we get, I think what is incumbent on us as a thought worker, as a consultant, is to look at at least 2 or 3 steps beyond what we are currently doing.
Current program of work.
Absolutely. So that is definitely one. The other thing is that in many ways we talk about expertise is really key in this world, but in my opinion, there is another point of view, which is expertise is almost overrated, which basically means that everybody is doing things for the first time. I mean, can you get a 10-year experienced Scala programmer? You will not. So the maximum experience you will get is X number of years, which is in single digits. Ditto for the business models that are coming up. Everybody is learning. So we can be experts as well as our customers are, which means it is also incumbent on us to bring the great ideas on the table. Not just that, to showcase that we can do things and help them push things forward. So it is no longer just a nice experiment, but almost get it to a point where it can be implementable in a very cost-effective way.
No, I was just trying to take stuff away. When we sit offshore, so many thousand miles away from our customers, it's very easy to just get stuck into the piece of code that we are writing and the stories that we need to get delivered, while losing sight of the big picture and the competitive challenges that our customers are facing. I mean, just thinking about the stuff you mentioned, Amazon Go as the next gen shopping technology, and then how does Kroger transform its several thousand square feet of retail space to compete with that, but even their digital space. I mean, that's a really fascinating thing for anyone on that project to think about. And I guess there are similar thoughts that anyone can go through on their individual projects as well.
Correct. And I think the bigger change is that that I found that was common in all the conversations that we have had today, was that everybody is expecting somewhere technology and technologists, and specifically we talked about in ThoughtWorks context today, so ThoughtWorks to actually be leading the way, or at least ideating, or doing something in this space. Right? They are expecting us. The expectations of the outside world from from ThoughtWorks is actually increasing. Whether it's Cheyenne and how we operate in data space, whether it's Sharad Sharma and how do we engage from a community perspective, or whether it's our customers saying that we need ideas and how technology can disrupt the competitive advantage or the competition or the use of things that I have today, and how does technology actually help me do that. So, and definitely a lot to take in and do something about it. So I'd like to just thank both Sagar and Sameer and to give us this insight. Me and Sumit were very happy to host this, and it was a very interesting conversation.
In fact, I'll go back and listen to this podcast again.
All right.
Thank you.
All right.
Thanks,
Thanks
guys.
all of you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.